pursuing happiness. You're doing all right. When... The other guy's around and he means business, so get going. Remember, you're off base. You've just got time to save yourself. Drop whatever you're doing. Find the nearest hole and make like a mole. Pick a room in a good building, close to the ground. It ought to be airtight and light-proof as possible, with the doors shut, windows closed.
It's a bomb. Duck and cover. Duck and cover. Duck and cover. That's the first thing to do.
If you saw it advancing on you a mile away, you'd have about 30 seconds to take cover. Make for the nearest entrance, but be orderly about it.
If you are at home when a surprise attack occurs, crawl beneath a table if it is very near, or drop to the floor with your back to the window.
That fog has contaminated everything it touched with radioactive matter, which we'll call hot stuff.
After many generations of living under fear of a nuclear war, with constant reminders from government commercials such as the ones you just watched, it didn't take too many images of New York from 9/11 to bring back familiar fears and to scare a whole nation that had never been attacked in its own territory before. Confused by the fear of an unknown enemy and the thirst for revenge, Americans easily accepted a war, the invasion of Afghanistan, which had actually already been planned.
And anger to resolution.
The smallest details.
Whether we bring our enemies to justice or bring justice to our enemies, justice will be done.
Right away, the United States accused Osama bin Laden, though they never produced the evidence they claimed to have against him. Also, nobody seemed to be surprised by the lack of motive from bin Laden himself. This was as if everyone was ready to accept the fact that he hated our civilization just because somebody pointed a finger at him. The first thing that every past terrorist made known is why the attacks were made. However, a few days after 9/11, Osama clearly stated that he had nothing to do with them at all. In 2006, the FBI stated that they didn't have any hard evidence against bin Laden, which contradicted their original statement. Actually, what he was wanted for was his involvement in the American embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. Officially, Osama bin Laden was never wanted for the September 11th attacks.
If there is any terrorism,
In the following
know who to
clip,
blame.
Alex Jones,
if any
a popular
terrorism
radio
comes, it's from this
host,
government.
talks about
And if there
Osama
was
bin
an
Laden
outside threat like a
1
bin
month
Laden who was a
before
known
the
CIA
9/11
asset in the
attacks.
80s, he's the boogeyman they need.
However, as more evidence is gathered that 9/11 was an inside job, it seems more likely that 9/11 wasn't the job of a whole government, but of a small group of people within the government that called themselves the neocons,
in my opinion,
or neoconservatives,
treason.
which included Dick Cheney,
The cabal of
Paul Wolfowitz,
neoconservatives
Richard Pearl,
at
and
PNAC,
Donald
I
Rumsfeld,
think you all know what that
who all
is,
funded the project
who
for the
planned
new
this
American
war.
century.
Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, Libby, Pearl. This cabal knew the American people would not stand for a war against Iraq unless there was, as they put it in their own document, a new Pearl Harbor. 9/11 supplied that.
The American Constitution doesn't allow the United States to wage a preemptive war and reserves the power of declaring war on another nation to Congress. This means that every time a president has wanted to enter a war or start a new one, he had to wait for a military incident, whether created or provoked, to justify the use of force in front of Congress and the American people. In 1898, the United States went to war with Spain in order to take the control of the Caribbean area. The pretext came from the sinking of the USS Maine, which was anchored on the outside of Cuba. The Spanish were blamed right away, even though they denied any involvement in it. Images of the sunken ship, as well as those of the funerals of the dead soldiers, were shown in the first movie theaters in the nation, moving the nation to allow Theodore Roosevelt to start a war that he had already planned. Only in 1980 would America recognize that the Spanish were not responsible for the attack, and that the ship actually exploded because some explosives were stacked too close to the steam room, though this may have been done on purpose too. Either way, America had now new strategic positions from the Caribbean all the way to the Philippine Islands. In 1915, it was the sinking of the Lusitania by a German submarine that would bring the Americans into the First World War. However, it also appears that the U.S. had secretly slipped to the Germans that the ship was carrying a special cargo of weapons, heading to England. The ship also just happened to be carrying more than 100 American passengers.
The facts of yesterday and today speak for themselves. With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination
it was the Pearl Harbor
of our
attack that
people,
allowed President Roosevelt to
we
declare
will
war
gain
on Japan.
the inevitable triumph, so help us God.
We needed one thing, which our own resources could not make available to us. That vital need
3,000
was the
soldiers
information
died in that
available in
surprise
Washington
attack,
from the
but
intercepted
history
dispatches,
would later reveal
which
that the
told when
administration
and
knew
where
of the attack in
Japan would
advance,
probably strike.
but did everything
I did
possible
not
to
get
delay
this
the
information.
transfer of information to the Hawaiian port. Here, Admiral Kimmel, the port's commander, confirms this.
Immediately following the attack, U.S. representatives in Saigon met with representatives of the South Vietnamese government.
In
They jointly
1964,
agreed that
the United
joint
States
retaliatory
decided to
action was
officially
required.
declare war on North Vietnam.
The President's approval.
This happened after the Tonkin Gulf incident, where North Vietnamese boats were accused of launching
Confusion.
torpedoes
And
at the
events
USS
afterwards
Maddox.
showed
Right after,
that our judgment
Secretary of
that we've been
Defense
attacked
Robert
that day was
McNamara
wrong.